This is the Crown Shades 13 by 13 pop-up gazebo, and the thing that struck me the first time I set it up was how fast I could go from bag to full shade with almost no hassle, and how much cooler it felt under the canopy compared to standing a few feet away in the sun. I put this in the portable shelter category for people who need real shade and a little weather protection without committing to a permanent structure. If you host backyard get-togethers, set up at a farmer's market, tailgate before a game, or just want a comfortable spot at the park or beach, this fits. I'm usually setting up by myself, and I care more about stability and heat reduction than fancy trim or extra pockets. That's the lens I use testing this. The design makes sense once you work with it. The legs stand on a 10 by 10 footprint, but the canopy flares out to a 13 by 13 roof, so you get the coverage of a bigger tent without needing the ground space of one. The headroom feels generous. I don't stoop walking around inside, and guests move through without ducking near the edges. The fabric has that dense, tight hand you get from a proper outdoor polyester, and the silver coating isn't just a speck on paper. You can see it on the underside and feel the temperature difference. The frame is alloy steel with a powder-coated finish, which in the hand feels reassuringly solid without being clunky. The joints are bolted, not riveted, and that pays off in how stable the trusses feel when there's a little wind. The soft touch buttons on the legs are a small detail, but they matter because you're not pinching fingers while adjusting height. Setup is where this stands out. There's a one-push center hub that locks all four legs from the middle. My routine is simple. Roll the bag to where I want it. Unzip, slide the frame out upright, open the legs a bit, toss the canopy top over if it's not already attached. Step under the frame and press up on the center hub. You feel and hear it click, and the whole structure takes shape at once. Then, I walk around and bring the legs to the height I want with the pinch-free buttons. Once you've done it once or twice, this is a couple of minutes, not a project. Takedown is the reverse. Press the release on the hub, the frame soft collapses inward, drop the legs, and it slides back into the bag. I appreciate that I can store it with the canopy still attached, which shaves time on the next setup. Performance for a canopy like this is shade quality, heat control, and how it handles typical weather. Under the fabric, the temperature is noticeably cooler because of the silver coating and the amount of coverage. On a cloudless afternoon, I sat under it for a few hours with a table and 6 chairs, and didn't feel that oven effect you get under cheap fabric. The UPF protection matters if you're out for long stretches. In a light shower, water beads and sheds off the eaves cleanly, and taped seams prevented drips through the middle. I did have one heavier rain where I watched for pooling. It didn't collect in the center, but you still want to keep an eye on the corners and give them a nudge if you see sagging. Wind is always the truth test. Properly staked with guy lines and weight bags, it stayed put during gusts that rattled my fence. But I don't treat any pop-up like a storm shelter. If I see a real system moving in, I drop it or pack it. That saved me from bent frames in the past. The mosquito netting is more than an afterthought. It zips cleanly, the mesh is fine enough to stop tiny pests, and it doesn't snag easily. The trick I learned is to clip the netting while the legs are still at the lower height, then extend to full height. That keeps you from stretching and leaves fewer gaps at the corners. I've used it open on 2 sides for airflow during the day, and fully enclosed at dusk when the bugs come out. It turns the space from nice shade to livable room in a few seconds. Real-world use always reveals the friction points. For transport, the bag with wheels is a big help. You don't have to deadlift the whole thing out of the trunk. Tip and roll does the job. The bag has a slim profile, but does run long. Measured end to end, it's around 4 feet. In a compact sedan, I had to angle it across the back seat rather than lay it flat in the trunk. In an SUV, it slides in easily. The wheels are sturdy on pavement and park paths. On soft sand, they still work, but I end up dragging more than rolling, which is pretty normal for anything with small wheels. The included stakes and guy lines live in a dedicated pocket, and that's nice because it keeps everything together instead of rattling around. I ran this through a bunch of scenarios. In my backyard, I set it over a dining table for a Saturday cookout that ran from late morning sun into evening. The shade footprint covered the table and gave me a comfortable walkway around the edges, and the high peak kept smoke from the grill from lingering under the roof. Toward dusk, I put the netting on, zipped one corner for an easy entrance, and we ate without swanning. During a quick afternoon shower the following weekend, I left it up and stayed dry. The seam tape did its job, and the water tracked to the edges instead of dripping down the middle. I also used it solo at a community market where space between vendors is tight. The 10 by 10 leg footprint kept me within my spot, but the 13 by 13 canopy gave me broader shade over my table and a couple of display racks. I did have to pay attention to the flared eaves, so I wasn't drifting over into a neighbor's space, which is something to consider if you're in strictly measured booths. On slightly uneven grass at a park event, the leg adjustments helped me level the roof. I set the uphill legs a notch longer and got an even look with stable footing. One use case that surprised me was a tailgate. I rolled it out from the car, pressed the hub, and had shade in less than 2 minutes. The cooler, the grill, and a couple of folding chairs slid under with room to spare. I kept the netting off during the day for airflow, then clipped 2 panels on the windward side as it got breezy. Before kickoff, I packed it down as a one-person job without holding up the group. That's where the one-push hub really earns its keep. No walking the corners, no fiddling with 4 separate locks. There are small touches that make living with it easier. The soft, pinch-free leg buttons are friendlier on the hands than spring pins. The center hub has a positive, tactile lock and a clear release so you don't wrestle with it. The fabric feels substantial, not plasticky, and after a couple of uses and one careful rinse, it still looks clean and tight. The frame has the rigidity you want when you hang a light lantern or clip netting all around. I never felt like I had to baby it. I like that there are weight bags included. Fill them with sand or small gravel and strap them to the legs, and you get an extra layer of insurance if you're somewhere you can't drive stakes into the ground. There are a few quirks. The first time I set up, I second-guessed the sequence of attaching the canopy and expanding the hub. The manual is clear, but muscle memory from older 4-corner tents will have you doing extra steps until you trust the center mechanism. The packed length means it doesn't play nicely with every trunk, so think about your vehicle. The unit has some heft. On the ground, the wheels make it a non-issue. Lifting it into a tall SUV by yourself might take a breath and a proper grip. And with the netting, aligning the zippers and clips is quicker if you start with one side zipped at ground level. Get that habit down, and it's smooth after that. I did have one minor part question early on. A cap on a corner truss was loose, and support responded quickly and shipped a replacement with instructions. It took me 5 minutes with a screwdriver to swap it. Knowing there's a parts replacement policy in place adds peace of mind, especially for a product you'll use across seasons. In the end, I keep reaching for this because it hits the practical notes I care about. It sets up fast with one person, covers a crowd without hogging floor space, keeps heat off with fabric that actually blocks sun, sheds light rain instead of leaking, and packs down into a bag I can move without a wrestling match. If you're the person who hosts backyard dinners, runs a pop-up booth, needs shade at youth sports, or wants a comfortable spot for beach days, this makes those days easier. If you only need something tiny for a couple of chairs, or you plan to leave a structure up through storms, look elsewhere. Used as intended, staked, weighed, and taken down when real weather rolls in, it's a dependable piece of kit that feels thought through. If you found this video helpful, hit subscribe, drop your questions or your own experience with this gazebo in the comments, and I'll get back to you.